So we've just got a new shock in, and this video is going to be on a brake service. We've got some new parts to put in there, check everything, lubricate everything. We'll also do a mini brake bleed on this. While we're in there, we'll also check the parking brake, and this is what I'm going to use. A ratchet with a 10mm socket, a 10mm wrench. I've got some new slide pins and caliper bolts. Those are Carlson. I'll put a link down in the description below. We've also got some new boots. This is what I use for a brake bleed. Just a piece of tubing going in a bottle. We've got a C-clamp to push the piston back into the caliper. We're going to need some brake grease and some brake cleaner and some caliper paint to repaint those. On the caliper itself, we've got two 10mm bolts here and here holding the brake caliper on. We've got our bleed port here, which is a 10mm as well. And I've got a bucket just to set the caliper on so we're not harming our brake hose once we take those bolts out. So you can start with your two 10mm bolts. Break both free. Loosen them both up before you remove either of them. It's a good idea to take these off and service them once a year, re-lubricate them. Now these bolts, I am going to save them, but I'm not going to reuse them because I have new ones. So this is where you might want to open up your bleed port. So I'm going to attach my bottle and tubing. If you don't have any ridges on your rotors, you can probably skip this step, but it will help the caliper come off if you do. Put your wrench over the tubing, slip the tubing on, then put your wrench on if it's easier. Let's try a different angle here. And a washer kind of helps hold it on, the tubing on. You want to crack that leader open. Okay, and then to remove your caliper, you got to push down on this retention spring. Use a pry bar or a screwdriver. Okay, you just got to be careful that your pads are coming with the caliper. Because pad pushes into it, so it could be braking however it's hooked in. Right here there's a clip holding the pad to the caliper, and that's why you want to release the pressure in the caliper with that bleed screw, because that's going to allow the pads to separate. So I'm going to go ahead and close the bleed screw now, because our pads are mostly off. Remove this out of the way for a minute. You don't want to drop it. There we go. See, there is a teeth in there. If you're doing this once a year, you should never have an issue where you're metal on metal. This one's getting pretty low. I can tell that the rotor's getting worn as well, so by the end of the year I'm looking at doing pads and rotors again on here. Okay, once you have your caliper off, you can pull your brake pads and set them so you remember which one goes to which side. And we're also going to push this piston back in here. That's going to be our mini brake bleed, because that's going to push out all the fluid that's in this caliper, and we'll just top it up because that's the fluid that is getting heat cycled. So when we top it up at the reservoir, the lines will fill up with new fluid. So this is what this bleed looks like. Our old fluid's going to go into the bottle. You can open up the bleeder again. And then we can compress our C-clamp to push the piston into the caliper. Make sure it's going in evenly. Okay, you can ignore the crappy paint job. It's mostly to protect it from rust, and it'll last about 2 years. All you're going to see when the calipers on the vehicle is this part right there. And I didn't mask these because we're replacing those. You got your slide pins inside, which you want to pull out. And we've got our new ones. We've also got new rubbers. Okay, they were a little stuck, but they did pull through. Now I got to do the other one and get the new one in there. Okay, those went in not too badly. We've got our new slide pins. You're going to need some brake grease. Let's do one at a time. Get that smeared all over. Well, the tricky part's going to be getting it started. You want to make sure that the lips are seated in the grooves. I think we got it. And repeat for the second one. Both of those are in. And no need to smear grease all over the back of the pad. You only need to do where the caliper's touching, so I just do a little bit on the piston. And then we did brake clean these. Clean them up. Like I said, I'm probably going to order new ones this year. They have a kind of a claw that pushes into the piston. Careful not to get any grease on the brake pad. And the brake pads, the contact points, you want to grease those. So on both pads, just a little bit. The outside pad has these, has this clip. It's got these two little dots that fit into the caliper. Slides in. Didn't lube this one. And the pad slides on these. There's one on the top, one on the bottom. And you don't need to lube those if you're lubing this, but you need to clean this. Make sure this is clean with brake clean and a brush. I did check my e-brakes. They were in rough shape. It was seized. So I removed everything until I can order hardware. And a good idea is to put a couple of lug nuts on here by hand. Okay, so it's on like that. We'll grab our new bolts. Came with the pins. And I do put a little bit of grease on here so they don't seize into the pins. I don't put any on the threads. don't use Loctite either, because I want them to come back out again. Check them once a year. Okay, and those are 10mm. We're just going to hand tighten them. The torque, I can't remember, it's either in the 20s or 30 foot-pounds, which you can easily do with a small ratchet wrench. Don't need a... I'm sorry. The OEM bolts were 10mm. These new ones aren't 10mm. Yeah, these new ones are 12. Not sure why. Alright, snug. Okay, before you pump the brake pedal and move that piston out to squeeze the pads together, you should be able to slide the brake nice and freely. If you can't, there's an issue where something's binding up, and especially with the new hardware, it should be nice and smooth. If you're using old hardware and it's a bit rusty, you won't get that nice smooth back and forth. We can remove our lug nuts from the rotor and reinstall our wheel, and this side's done. So if you want to see a video of the front procedure, check this one out and tune into my next one.